on the issue dilemma of skill or chance, Indian regulations pertaining to the digital gaming sector. We have with us moderator Rahul Nagar, VP Payments and Gaming, ATM, Anirudh Rastogi, the founder of IKIGAI Law, and Vidushpat Singhania, managing partner at Krida Legal. So Rahul, over to you to carry on the proceedings.
Thank you for having us on this particular topic, and we have the esteemed guests who are the legal experts on how the law sees a particular scenario to unfold. And I want to understand that how they see this has been the battle which has been going on between a game of chance and a game of skill. There has been multiple instances dated as back as 1968 and 66, and we are already 50 years ahead of that particular curve, and we are still deliberating on that point. So, Anirudh, Vidush, how do you guys see how that in which direction we are moving at this particular point in time, and what is the legal stand on a game of chance and as a game of skill?
Anirudh, you want me to go first, or you want?
Yeah, feel free, please.
Right. Thanks, Anirudh, and thanks, Rahul, for that. You know, this debate of game of skill or game of chance, it's emanating, and I'm sure the entire people who are hearing this are also aware. It's emanating because our law, which is a Public Gambling Act of 1867, which was also adopted post the Constitution coming into the picture, says that games of chance are prohibited, but games of skill are excluded from the ambit of gambling. This is way back in 1950s. This law was also incorporated for India. And in the Supreme Court in 1958, in the Satyanarayan case, ended up saying that rummy is a game of skill because it involves you knowing the fall of the cards, memorizing the cards, amongst many other things, even though it has a card draw or a card, the element of chance was there because anybody could get any card. And that same principle followed in Chamar Bagwala, where it dealt with prize competition.
Mhm.
And it followed with Dr. K.R. Lakshmanan, which dealt with horse racing in betting and horse racing, saying this any game where skill predominates over chance is a game of skill.
Correct.
Obviously, at that point of time, internet was not known, obviously. Post, I think, the internet revolution and the digital revolution in India, we've had a number of online operators coming into the picture, right from the early 2000s. Now they started with rummy, then came in the poker, and now then came in fantasy sports. The line, I think, is blur because technically betting and gambling falls within the ambit of the state list, but all remote communications falls within the ambit of the central list. Now, where does this issue of games of skill falls? I don't think anybody has an idea, and I think this is an interpretation where each state is taking its own stand. And taking that cue, I think Telangana started with this first thing where they said that while games of skill are outside the ambit of gambling, games of skill for states, they said we consider it within the ambit of betting and gambling. And as a state, betting and gambling being a state subject, we have a right to make a law.
Correct.
That was followed by Andhra Pradesh and that was followed by Tamil Nadu. And we keep hearing murmurs that Karnataka may also follow suit soon. But all is not bad because while one news is coming on this side where certain states are prohibiting certain games of skill, we also have the news coming from Niti Aayog, which I'm sure Anirudh will delve on later, is where they said that they've come out with guidelines for fantasy sports, saying that fantasy sports is a game of skill and basic guideline which any state could follow. We've also had the Law Commission report saying that if you're not able to prohibit gaming and gambling on a larger front, why don't you regulate it? So that's again a constitutional body making a recommendation. Sure. And you also had recently the state of Meghalaya also legalizing various forms of gaming. So while we have certain negative news coming, we also have positive news coming. So I think those have to be balanced out.
Thanks, Vidush. So yes, and thanks for the summary on how games of skill and games of chance, that distinction has kind of played out in the courts and from state to state. See, the challenge is that in the era predating the advent of digital games, it was still fairly manageable. You had a local, you're playing a game locally in a particular state. You're more than happy to subject yourself to the laws of that state. It works fine for the business. But with digital games, when you are offering a game on the internet across the country, it is very difficult for a business to essentially keep tweaking its business model from state to state. And it's very difficult to also enforce or implement that distinction in the gameplay from state to state. And then that problem gets exaggerated when a particular state were to choose to regulate onerously or ban the game, right? As we've been seeing has happened. Now, the jurisprudence around games of skill and chance has, to my mind, developed effectively over the years. There are, right from your Public Gaming Act to the Supreme Court judgments on the subject, they've carved out that distinction reasonably well. I think this new trend of one or two states that have chosen to implement laws that do not respect that distinction is a bit of a departure, and is an unwelcome departure. In fact, lately we've had foreign investors particularly be kind of raise an alarm, and very often there are a lot of questions that we receive as lawyers from potential investors that on this concerning trend. Which way are we going? Are other states going to follow suit or not? And I don't think that's the case. Honestly, as you rightly mentioned, at the central level, there's a relatively positive narrative. Also, if there are states that are choosing to regulate or that are choosing to ban, there are many other states that are choosing to regulate, or there are policies, if not on on ancillary issues, right? Like, for example, there's a clear case for the gaming industry is now becoming and being recognized as an important revenue contributor. It's being recognized for the employment opportunities, for example. And there are other states who are bringing in policies around animation, around skilling in this area and whatnot. So I think there's I don't think that the one or two states that have taken a departing, like a divergent view to this are necessarily reflective of a wider trend. But it definitely creates a lot of challenge where, there are obviously investors asking questions. Businesses find it difficult to kind of, project the future of their industry. So I think we need some sense here, some kind of unifying theme across, for gaming legislation across the country would be very helpful for business and investors.
So, Anirudh, Vidush, can you help us understand for our audience that the court has repeatedly said a game is a game of skill if it is more predominantly skill, or there are certain parameters that somebody has to learn, and the chance parameters are on the lower side. Can you help us understand in a layman's language? Because the general perception of public is like, if there are cards, then it is a game of chance, or if there is something else, then it is a game of skill. So for the general audience, it becomes a little cumbersome for them. Can you help us understand that what are the parameters a game should be evaluated upon for a game to be a game of skill?
Sure, Rahul. I mean, in fact, not only the general audience. I think this is a problem that plays out in the court. If the matter is before the court, it plays out when the police, because the problem is that this is there's so much subjectivity in determining whether something is a game of chance or skill, and predominantly a game of chance and skill. And most games will have elements of both. So let me give you some examples. Poker, for instance, there's obviously an element of chance where if you have a better card in your hands, it enhances your increases your ability or increases your odds. But at the same time, it is whether it is your ability to kind of anticipate what cards your other players might have. What is the probability of certain cards to come fall in your hand or not? There are just so many elements of skill which have been laid down and determined by courts as well, and not only in India. There's a lot of academic literature on why games like poker, rummy, etc. Are pretty much games of skill. But what is more predominant, and how is there's no way you can mathematically, with mathematical precision, establish whether whether elements of skill are predominant or elements of chance are predominant. That means that it very much the outcome of a particular matter will determine from person to person, from judge to judge. which is the challenge. I think in the past the industry has also been advocated for slightly more objective criteria to determine whether something is a game of skill or chance. And to my mind, it is possible to do this using statistical models. For instance, if you were to, and know certain platforms do this as well, where if you were to say, track how a player is performing over a period of time, a chance element could determine the outcome once, twice, and thrice. But if you're constantly playing better and better and better, and you're improving over time, then statistically you can establish that there's a skill element which is predominant over a chance element. So there are ways in which you can bring in some mathematical precision to this question, and I think it's time for legislation and courts to recognize that, because otherwise the test currently in play introduces a lot of subjectivity here.
Rahul, I think I'll start with the cricketing term that a lot of times people use. And coming from after GABA, that sounds, it's a good celebration for us. I think Sunny Gavaskar said, right, that form is temporary, class is permanent. That applies not only to a game of skill like cricket, but that applies to even gaming as well, right?
Correct.
That if you may get a hot run, you may get a good number of set of cards, you might win a few hands, but eventually a person or a player who is more skilled, as we say, who has more class, he's more experienced, he will win. And that is, I think, what Anirudh is also referring to, right? You have proper statistical model, statistical and mathematical studies have been done, formulas have been developed, to determine what is a game of skill and what is a game of chance. So rather than, I think, a legal test is predominance, which the Supreme Court has laid down. Now, how do you justify that predominance? I think couple of things that we look at. The first is obviously we look at the principles that have been laid down by the court, right? So even they have acknowledged, like in the case of rummy and in the case of horse racing, that there is a certain chance of element of chance in the sense of as I said, a draw of the cards in rummy, and obviously in horse racing, a horse could get injured or it might just rain. Like those elements of chance are obviously there. But there are many elements of skill. So each element of skill has to be listed down or analyzed. And this is what we ask a number of the game developers. What are the elements of skill that you've incorporated in a game? And then we try to analyze that vis-a-vis the overall scenario of the entire game package that is being given to the consumer. So that is one element that happens. Second, obviously, we say wherever we think that there is some kind of a doubt or, we need a bit more justification, we always ask people to get some statistical or a mathematical study done, because that is the basis on which we can also make certain assertions. So that is, I think, how we perceive what a game of chance and skill is. Particularly, one thing which I saw when I saw the state acts and the kind of letters that have gone on to the MeitY as well, they've gone on to say certain games like chess, right? Ban chess.com, ban carom. Now, those are recognized as sports across the world, including India. Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports and Government of India has recognized chess and carom as a sports, I think, for the last 30, 40 years.
These are sports.
Yeah, now how are you looking at banning them? And what I think we are also not realizing is, and I think it's another angle of esports also coming in, is number of our games are moving from the physical or the world to the virtual world. And we have esports and other gaming as a part of the challenge, even in Asian Games and maybe at some point of time in the Olympic Games, right? Now, how do you tackle that? Because now you moved away from the gaming aspect, right? It now become a serious profession. It has become something where you go to represent India. Even when you talk about poker, certain versions of poker are recognized as sports. They have to comply with anti-doping. They are tied up with the WADA, World Anti-Doping Agency. They're complying with anti-doping regulations. They're also complying with certain International Olympic Committee standards that have been laid down. So then where is the line there then, right? Just because it's online does not mean that the sport has stopped occurring. Especially you take that also from the fact that Supreme Court has said that even cards and playing cards can be a sport.
Right.
So you take that observation. So where is the line? Where is the line between one, I understand gaming, game of skill, game of chance. The second line is what is the sport and what is not, because sport always takes place for money in the sense of, even if you go and play a district match, or if you say when you are a youngster, you 5, 10 people come together, 11 people come together, enter a team. They pay a participation fee and they may be entitled to a prize. Now,
Right.
is that also illegal? If you say all games of skill for stakes are illegal, then I think you have maybe 100 million culprits running around in Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, and Telangana, and those are youngsters who are 8, 13, 14, 15, who are playing those games of skill for money in the sense that. So I think, are we looking at doing such a thing? And I'm sorry, but taking a bit more time. But taking that observation, I saw the Gujarat High Court judgment where they said this is a rather interesting observation, where the judge said that by bluffing other player or by trying to overplay your hand or trying to exercise your skill, you're actually cheating or committing a fraud on the other player. And I was quite surprised. Maybe I'm sure the judge was thinking about something very potent and intelligent when he was thinking, writing that. But if I go back and take into sports, I said tomorrow, as soon as a leg spinner bowls a googly, he should be sent to jail immediately at that point of time, right? Because he is enlisted and he said that I'm bowling leg break, and suddenly he bowls a googly. It's cheating. When a batsman suddenly switches to a switch hit, he's cheating. He should be again said. Is that what I think the intention? I don't think that is the larger intention. I think that is the deeper delving that we need to do when we talk about certain statements.
No, rightly said. So, Videsh, since this gaming fraternity and the gaming business in Indian territory has started post 2000, or we can say the after the internet bubble, but we have seen that these game of skills have been and the operators have been in existence in the western part of the world. So, how those countries have drafted their you can say legislations, and what type of knowledge or what type of learnings we should take away, or the government should have a forward looking approach towards them, because these guys have done this business 20 years ahead of us or 10 years ahead of us, and they have also gone through these loops which we are going right now. So what all is available on that side? And a second question which I'm putting across on the same front is, does should a government legislation should come on where a certification could be given to the game, so that this issue does not go for legal battle, and the operators, instead of managing their own businesses, running and trying to scale those businesses, are not fighting legal battles with somebody who is coming up with a PIL, and then all the attention goes to that. So what are your views on that?
Sure. So, Rahul, to address the first question, you know, uh, there are different approaches adopted by different countries. I think no a glove does not fit all. I think so. We can't have the same approach that any other country adopted. But like just taking a UK and a US approach as a general starter.
Mhm.
So UK, what they have done is under the Gambling Act, they've classified all games, even games of skill for stakes, within the ambit or requiring a license under the Gambling Act. But they have created various categorizations under it, right? Where it is serious gaming or gambling, you have to pay more license fee. The norms that are applicable to you are much stricter. And where it is more of a social gaming, that we're talking about games of skill for money, where you are paying less amount, the regulations are far easier, standards are far easier, the ability to get a license is far easier,
Mhm.
right? So I think that's a good way of looking at it. The second is the US approach, where something like us in India, each state is making it their own law,
Mhm.
and then you have to comply with it. It's as simple as that.
Got it.
But those states, when they are making the law, they are also talking to each other, as well as what they're trying to do is they're talking to the operators to see what kind of standard they can impose, which even the operators will be able to comply with, and and there are certain common standards, and there will be only a few peculiar standards.
Mhm.
And those peculiar standards are more things like having a vault or having a monitoring system in place, where the state government can look into your system to see whether everything is hunky dory, whether what you're saying and whatever the licensing conditions are, you are complying with it. So their monitoring or their legal aspect or inspection aspect is only limited to that aspect. They are not then going into the aspect of regulating your gameplay. And I think what the second aspect they are concerned, even in the UK and the US, is that if you are using or if players from that particular jurisdictions are playing, then you should be paying them certain amount of tax. So
Correct.
I think it's in UK it's called the point of consumption tax. In US I don't know what the exact term that they use. So I think that could also be because the states were also concerned that if in case it goes on in a central manner, they will lose revenue and they would want to, if people are playing from their particular jurisdiction, they will want to take revenue from that. So I think that's a fair approach. If they want to take the monitoring and collecting tax approach, then I think states, if they're looking at it in that myopic view or that limited view, then I think each state can look at it. And with having a central guideline, which is where I think Niti Aayog is trying to go, have a central guideline in place where once you have that guideline in place and if there's a self-regulating body, they will also look into the operational aspect and they will give you a certification. The certification will be a soft certification. Nobody can stop PILs, right? And as lawyers, I think 3 lawyers sitting here, you can understand that all lawyers will find certain loophole to file some case, whichever part. So I don't think we can stop application of PILs, but it will certainly give certain certainty of protection to the investors as well as the gaming operators. Listen, we have some kind of a certification and some kind of a stamp on our on our operation. You will have to keep fighting your legal battles, and each state can also have, as I said, a limited myopic view in the sense that yes, they can have their own standards, look at the vault system to look at how they're going to monitor each game, and they can have their own system of taxation or registration. And this is not new and novel. It has been followed in lottery, where say even if you're selling a draw of Sikkim in the state of Maharashtra, you have to go and register your draw, or an operator will have to go and register there. So I think that's a similar system that we could also follow for other games of skill.
Got it. So
I somehow, sorry,
yeah,
if I may just add to that. So I somehow do not like the idea of a prior certification, right? And the reason is we are an agile industry, right? I mean, there's a fair bit of massive amount of innovation that's happening, new game formats, new that are being introduced in the market. To have a structure where every new game needs to go through a process of certification, it delays things. It sometimes there may not be. It's just a little too onerous. I feel a better way of doing this would be that you recognize that the test in place today does not work. You need objectivity. Change that test, and then let the gaming companies comply. And of course, if they're not in compliance, if they're not able to comply with that test, then the game is pulled out. There's action that can be taken. The test itself, I believe, the test itself also needs to be flexible in the sense that to kind of keep up with new kind of gaming models, new formats, and that is best done by a self-regulatory framework. I believe that for any agile industry, which is largely, for most things digital, I believe that self-regulatory models do work much better because the industry is best placed, has the most kind of has the best understanding of where and how the industry is shaping up, and they're best placed to do this. So have a self-regulatory model. If somebody wants to preemptively introduce, if there's a doubt, one can actually allow a company to go preemptively to the SRO to take a prior certification if you need to, but that should not be mandatory, I believe.
No, rightly put across, Anirudh, and we have seen that with new gaming models or new businesses coming up, these self-regulatory bodies are in a better situated or better position because they need not go through that complete iterative process of legislation, and they can quickly tweak and they can quickly modify as per the requirements of the business and then as per the requirements of the industry. And when everyone is in consensus on that, they can quickly send it across to the different bodies. And we have seen that in the gaming industry there are different bodies who are doing self-regulatory work, which all of us are part of, and we have done representations to the government where we are coming up with our charters, our advertisement charters, our skill gaming charters, and we have the esteemed judges from Supreme Court who are members and who are the advisors to these self-regulatory bodies. So that's rightly put across that we definitely, the self-regulatory bodies are in a better position to move this queue forward, because otherwise it's a sort of a chicken again sort of a scenario, right? Because the industry is not big enough and then the attention from the government doesn't come up. But once you become reach to a certain number, then all of a sudden the attention goes, oh, okay, there is a business which was ignored, now we need to draft policies for that, right? So how do you? Saw that Vidush want to have a point on that.
Actually, I wanted to echo Anirudh's view and actually add to that a bit because, besides the fact which he said that the industry needs to be flexible, right? Because in the digital age now, I think within whatever last week is already outdated.
Correct.
There's a constant innovation that's happening. Taking that, going through the traditional system of regulation and certification does not work.
Right.
Having said that, I agree with Anirudh that maybe a prior certification may not always work because in the end, certain self-regulating bodies may be dominated by certain players, and if a particular small operator, what is a small operator's ability or his main trump card to compete with people who are already in dominant position? That he's going to innovate, he's going to come out with a new game model where he will be able to pull in certain new players. Now, if he has to let that out from day one and give it for the purposes of self certification, and then it's going to a body registrar, and then to a committee, and then they're looking at it, deliberating it. In the end, however much in a utopian scenario we will want to live, that information gets out to the various other operators as well, who are maybe a part of the self-regulating body or who may be outside as well. And it does not take much time for them also to see, oh yeah, this sounds interesting, why don't we start copying it? Obviously they will not say copying, they'll come out with their own innovations and their own thought processes. But that poor guy who actually sent his game for approval would have lost the novelty itself and the fact that he was going to launch his game and try to compete with the bigger businesses. He would have already lost his
Correct.
main trump card. So I think that's something also I agree that maybe you have to go with the system, and in case questions are raised at some point of time, you can go for a certification at that point.
It should be a post facto because we have seen that there are times there has been scenarios where people have gone for trademarks, people have gone for patents, and then it takes ages for those patents to come in, right? And by that time, somebody else is already there in the market with those innovations. It just requires a thought process, and then it also becomes a barrier for a new entrant, right? It becomes capital intensive that he has to go through a certain process, then only he will be in a position to start a business for his livelihood. That's fairly put across. So we have certain questions coming in from audience. And okay, the question is a game of chance banned if no money is bet? And why cannot I play a game of chance online with my friends in lockdown? So definitely you can play a game of chance without money. And as far as I remember, there was some court verdict where one of the judges said that if you are playing this game without money, then it's legal, and the moment you put in money, it becomes illegal. I'm not sure of which judgment, but there was a fair point raised by one of quotes, and which everyone found that this is amusing, that if it is illegal, then the money betting, it becomes moves that game to a betting scenario rather than a game of skill, right? That's where it is. Now there is another one. Are there any regulations in India to govern the game of skill that can be adopted for digital games?
So, Rahul, taking the first question, maybe adding to what your view is, our Public Gambling Act prohibits games of chance,
Right.
but there's also a provision in most of the states act which says that stakes are not necessary to be seen. So even if you're playing a free game under the law, I'm just saying, and though the police does not do it on a regular level, they can still come and seize your goods and your server and your computer, because even if they suspect that you're doing gambling or not. So while yes, I agree the game of chance for free technically, because there is no commission, there is no gambling house, there's nothing. But technically, the power is still there with the police to still seize your goods and your and whatever equipment you are using for that purposes. So that is one thing, even if they have a suspicion. Uh, and the second part, I think, which we have been discussing largely, is regulation on the game skill industry, right? So this is where I think we are all making efforts as lawyers, as industry body, that some kind of guidelines or regulation come in. Obviously, we do, as Anirudh said earlier, ideally we don't want a strict regulation which is not flexible to the extent where it kills innovation, it kills the digital space in which the lot of game skill operators are operating. Rather than that, we would want a regulation to recognize self-regulating bodies and then let the self-regulating bodies lay down objective standards, and every person has the right to tick boxes. If I'm complying with it, tick tick tick, and it's a self-declaration. If it gets questioned, he can go for a pre-certification, or he can go for a adjudication in case there are substantial issues raised. So, that's my view on it.
There's another one. How is fantasy not a game of chance? So, as per the court says, means I will take on this. As far as the courts have said, and we have been harping upon this particular point, that any game which has a predominant skill involved and is not related to the end result of the game is treated as a game of skill, because you are not betting, or you are not basing your judgments on who is going to win, right, or who is going to lose. The fantasy sports has seen it evolve throughout this particular period, that you are selecting a certain set of players who you feel like, after studying their past performances, ground, what sort of pitch is there, what sort of bowling conditions are there, who's going to bat first, second, XYZ, multiple factors put in together, that these are the 11 set of players who are going in this event which is happening today. For a cricket particularly, maybe in a kabaddi, that equation and the number of players changes, so it varies from game to game. But you're not putting your thoughts on, okay, definitely I'm saying this guy is going to win, right? Then I'm not sure anyone in this world will be in a position to put it across. But yes, if you we have seen computerized models who have been able to predict that this is how the results are going to be. People have spent their lives. There have been academia who have put in like 20 years trying to create certain models to predict something, right? That's where the whole markets have been. So fantasy is defined as a game of skill, because predominantly you are selecting a player's performance, how he's going to compete with a particular team on that particular day. You not just see his performance from last game, you also see his performance against those type of bowlers, against that particular team which has happened in past. So there are multiple factors around it. And now going ahead with this, so when we say this dilemma, or sort of you can say a thin line between a game of skill and a game of chance, I know the legal perspective has been that, okay, there are statistical models, but do you feel like there are certain thumb rules which general public, because it's more of a sort of a perception which public also have, right, around, and that's how our fabric of our society has been. So as far as the legal side, there certain thumb rules which you can help us tell our audience, okay, these are the basic thumb rules which move away from a game of skill to a game of chance. Anirudh?
Yeah, I mean, the basic thumb rule simply is that if, I mean, despite the chance, the randomness involved in a game,
Mhm.
if there is a case to be made, if you can identify a player who is able to play better and better despite the randomness in the game. For example, there may be a person playing poker with you, constantly getting a bad hand, right? But is still able to salvage the situation, win, or at least not lose too much. And this person is able to do this again and again and again. Then there is then clearly there's a more a predominant skill element to the game. I think that's how I would put it very simply. But when you actually get down to implementing and kind of making when you look at, say, some of the algorithms that have been evolved, or some of the statistical models have been evolved, I don't think it is it is a complicated kind of there's a little bit of a complication. It's very difficult to kind of oversimplify this, but ultimately we are really, I mean, basically, if you're able to win the game or salvage your situation over and over again, despite the randomness, I think that's what makes it skill based.
Vidush?
I think I think Anirudh just covered it, but just to sum it up, maybe if a thumb rule is, if something has been classified as a game of chance already by any of the courts, don't try to justify it that no, I have added this element of skill, now it is 100% a game of skill, right? because a lot of times people try to do, and I will not name the games, but some card games, everything. They say no, but we've added one more card, therefore it has now become a game of skill, or we've added some extra factor. That unless you're able to remove the key element based on which that game was classified as a game of chance. So maybe only the nomenclature you're keeping the same nomenclature, but if you're able to remove that basic element, and I think maybe take a case of Ludo, right? If you're able to remove dice, or you're able to remove the element or the absolute random element of chance that is there in a dice roll by various methods like putting in time, putting in strategy, putting in uh, maybe total moves, whatever. Like there's a lot of innovations taking place there. Then maybe you can move towards even a game like that, going to a game of skill. But beyond that, I think it's a tough call, because if something has been classified as a game of chance, to go to courts and try to justify it otherwise will take a lot of effort.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah, if I may add, I mean, sometimes though, changing that one element can actually make all the difference. So we as lawyers sometimes get involved in the game design process as well, right? When there's a certain game where there's question around what is predominant, skill or chance. You can actually, and these are very, exciting mandates where you're literally, sitting with while you don't want your lawyers to be overbearing on what the game should ultimately look like, I think that could be a disaster. But sometimes it is needed to kind of just identify what element is can be tweaked to reduce or increase the skill component, and yeah.
But sometimes Anirudh, and I think Anirudh will agree, sometimes we lawyers, when we sit down, we say, put A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all these elements of game of skill. And when the operator comes by, listen, if I put it, this game will not work. So, then you're almost negotiating with your own client sometimes. Okay, fine, at least do this much, and do, if you're not all elements, at least put these elements, otherwise we can't justify it as a game of skill. I don't know what Anirudh your experience is, but, a lot of times we end up negotiating with our own clients.
No,
It is difficult, but
scenario where you take away the fun part or the experience which consumer is having with that game, then it becomes too much of a, you can say, an algorithmic process rather than a game, or rather than an event where people also enjoy while doing it, right? It's because any game, like you might like chess, I might like tennis, because we have different type of interest. We like the process which a chess board goes through, and I like the process which a code gives me, or sort of an environment which a code gives me. But if I try to combine both these things just to put it across as a game of skill, then it becomes a very, you can say, a tedious process that it takes away the fun element of the game itself. Yeah,
no,
Anirudh, you were saying something.
No. I mean, I just wanted to comment on what Vidushpat was saying, that yes, I mean, you sometimes do end up negotiating with your clients on game design itself. And I think the onus is on us to understand where the designer is coming from, rather than they trying to understand where legal is coming from. So you need to kind of step into their shoes. And then ultimately, if something can't be done, it can't be done. You have to step in and say no. But very often I've seen a lot of things can be done to enhance the skill component. And see, ultimately, it is very difficult to you always say in black or white whether this is skill based or chance based. What you can do is you can mitigate risk, right? And there are things that one can do often at the design stage where to increase skill without necessarily changing the dynamics of the game. Very simple example where in one of the games we advised that, well, if you can have a nice set of trainer videos and FAQs, which essentially help, which kind of, these videos were meant to impart some certain basic strategy in the game, which could help you play better. Right now, what that does is it clearly then is essentially then what you're doing is the game becomes far more defensible, because now I have already identified what helps a player play better, and I'm in fact imparting that education to my players. Right, so you're reducing the chance element. I have a informed set of players on my platform then. So this was just one example that we played around where instead of tinkering with the game dynamics, we tried something else to kind of mitigate the risk of I think things can be done there.
you train and you make the audience or you make the consumer learn about more about the game so that he can improve upon that. Guys, we are running short of our time, so this is the last one which I want to put across to you. So earlier, this has been most of the time it has been debated as a business sort of a scenario where operators are being the one who are facing the heat. But over the last couple of years, we have seen that it has become a full-fledged industry where there are now players who are playing it professionally all across different type of games. So it also becomes a threat to their livelihood once a state bans a certain type of game or a state bans altogether any type of game, right? Now they have to look for different options to have their livelihood done. So as legal lawyers, what are your expectations from the Niti Aayog, or what are the two set of things which you expect that the government should definitely in near future come up with, so that this whole debate between a game of chance and a game of skill rests in peace, and the businesses can run smoothly? What are your expectations from the government?
I think we need a central framework, to be honest, and that's challenging, of course, because of the whole kind of debate around whether, firstly, is this cut and dry a state subject or not. But a central framework would be the best thing that can happen for the industry and for all stakeholders at large, I think. The second would be to, as we have been saying throughout, is to recognize objective standards. And tremendous amount of objectivity is possible with digital games, because the moment you take a game on a digital platform, it is possible to collect data, analyze it, and bring in the kind of objectivity that was not possible earlier. So I think these are the two things which will certainly go a long way. I believe.
So I echo, and maybe the echo what Anirudh is saying. You need a central standard, maybe especially understanding the fact that uh, uh, we are moved away from the traditional model of betting and gambling being a state subject and only based in premises. We have moved to a digital world now. This it can't be like most of the times from replies I've seen from the government that have come in and been filed in courts, so they say betting and gambling is a state subject. So I think recognition that this is actually, rather than a vice, a recognition that it is entertainment and needs to be regulated like any other form of entertainment, like OTT broadcasts. Also, basic guidelines are going to be laid down. Then after that, within those guidelines, you're allowed to offer your OTT platform. Similar to that, lay down the guidelines and then let the operators fill in within that. So I think that is one. The second aspect I thought, which is also equally crucial, is the element of taxation.
Mhm.
If you say, yes, we are regulating it, we're coming out with standard, we'll put 28% tax on the face value. I just don't think that model works. You'll push everything back into the gray market. You're seeing an economy and youngsters trying to play, through proper KYCs and through proper digital platforms, right? If you put such high rate of taxation, there will be illegal and dubious elements of society who will start operating these frivolous games. Operate youngsters and people will start playing with them, and they will get cheated, and there will be no recourse available to them. So besides a certification, a robust taxation model also needs to be looked at. You can't. I've heard, and this is a debate I was having with certain government officials at some point of time. When they were talking about regulation, they said we will have a system of 28% tax and rising, so like a reverse mechanism when we're talking about how rate high taxation can go when we start giving out licenses. And I said, listen, it's a no go. 28% on face value itself was a no go. And if you raise the taxation further and higher, uh, even if you come out of don't regulate itself, because even if you come out of the regulation or certification system, it will not pick up, it will not work.
Yeah,
So I think that's equally important in my
killing the
personal opinion.
business itself. So we have seen this happen. The horse racing businesses post the 28% GST. Their numbers have been falling year on year, and that's one of the reasons those businesses are struggling to move ahead. And very frequently we see that youngsters, just to avoid these texts, go into those gray areas, and very sad news have come up from different parts of the country where extreme steps have been taken. Okay, the last question from the audience we are going to take. Can AI be used to reduce the level of chance and turn games like Rummy into pure skill games? Well, uh, the operators already use that, so they use a randomizer so that there is no definite benefit to any of the players when the cards are drawn. So this card distribution algorithm keeps on distributing random cards to everyone, so that everyone has a fair play or a fair ground to play these games.
Or
I
even
guess.
when you use AI to say match people properly, right? So if you're ensured that you're matched with a player of your caliber, then obviously there is more of skill at play then, right? I mean, you're compelled to. It's not just so. So I think a lot can be done on this front. Yes.
Mhm. No, the platforms, the operators are learning on that side also, because it's for their advantage, right? If you can say a new user is coming and he bets or he starts to play with a pro, he's definitely, because this guy has an upper hand on the skill front and on the learning and on his experience and everything. This guy is going to beat this guy down or bash him down like anything. And the operators also lose because the guy who is coming onto the platform, this guy will be in a situation that, okay, somebody beats him down with certain number of points, that there is no scope for coming back, right? So definitely a level matching and the card draws are already being taken care of by industries in different manners, and those things are there in place. I guess we are already there, and we are running short of our time. So thank you, Anirudh and Vidush. You have very means openly explained what are the different type of games, how skill and game of chance can be defined, and what all are the challenges from, you can say, from an investor side, from an operator side, and what all are the expectations which all of us as legal lawyers and as operators are looking forward to towards the government. And we all of us are very positive that after this Niti Aayog paper, this is and esports becoming a medal sport, right? There will be a lot more focus, and there will be a lot more attention with more and more clarity on the taxation front, more and more clarity on the investment front, so that we can have more and more FDI coming from outside and boost this particular industry. And there is another vertical of internet commerce, or you can say internet entertainment, which grows big and grows beyond what our expectations are. So thanks a lot, everyone. Thanks a lot for the time. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Rahul. Thank you, Anirudh.
Thank you,
Well,
Raj.
thank you, gentlemen, for such a detailed discussion on what is perhaps one of the most contentious issues of the digital sector. With that, we come to the end of this session. Please stay tuned for the next sessions. Goodbye. Stay safe.
Thank you.